Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Kanelopoulos, and I'm here with MarkForest, who is candidate for Barnstable County Commissioner. Welcome to Falmouth, Mark, and I know that you are quite familiar with our town.
Well, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me. Thank you for having me on your show, and it's always great to be here in Falmouth. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you the question that probably you have had to answer 1,000 times. Why do you want to be county commissioner?
Well, that's a great question. I'm in this race largely because I really care deeply about the Cape, and I've worked on a number of important issues, and I believe that given my experience, given my background, given some of the success that I've had, and what I've learned, I think I can really do a good job as a county commissioner. It's an open seat, and I'm very excited about running, and I'm glad to be here to talk to you a little bit about why I'm running and what I hope to accomplish.
There's no question that you know the Cape. You live in Yarmouth, but you've been working in Falmouth on lots of projects for a long time. In fact, your experience is with most of the Cape towns.
Well, I've been very lucky. I started my career working for the Board of Selectmen in the town of Harwich in the early 1980s, and from there I went to Provincetown and worked in the town manager's office there for 4.5 years. I started off as the town's funding coordinator and then worked my way up to become town manager. Became town manager at the age of 29. And so my background is in municipal management, municipal government. And while I worked in Provincetown, my projects were largely focused on helping the town get grant money to redevelop the waterfront, McMillan Wharf, which was the home of a very large fishing fleet. And I also worked on cleaning up a groundwater contamination problem that was impacting our water supplies. And I worked on developing affordable housing programs and other community development initiatives in Provincetown. And I also had the opportunity to work on a number of regional boards, county boards, like the County Regional Transit Authority, the County Planning Agency, back then we called it the Cape Cod Planning and Economic Development Commission. So my experience just in Provincetown alone was incredibly enriching. It was invigorating. I enjoyed it immensely. While I was there, I got to know members of the congressional delegation. I got to know then Senator Paul Tsongas quite well. And then I got to also get to know Congressman Studs, Gary Studs. And not long after I became town manager, Congressman Studs asked me to join his staff, where I could bring my background and understanding on local issues and local government and regional government to bring that into the congressional office so that he could serve communities around the region and help provide my expertise to them. So.
And I know that water quality is high on your list of priorities for the Cape. And that reminds me that goes all the way back to those days where we remember here in Falmouth where we had so many difficulties with the water coming out of the base. And that, looking back on that seems to us, looking at it from today's perspective, to have been very difficult.
Groundwater contamination is clearly an area that I didn't plan to develop a lot of expertise in, but by virtue of the work, whether it was in a town manager's office, in local government, working with selectmen, or working with Congressman Studs, it's just something that I had to immerse myself in. In Provincetown, our problem there was very, very simple. We had a major well field in Truro, and across Route 6 on the other side of the highway, directly across from the well field, we had a leaking underground storage tank. And fuel came into the ground and then migrated. The groundwater flow was towards the well field. And we had to immediately shut down the well field because it would have drawn in that gasoline. And so I began to learn something about hydrology, groundwater flow, and how you go about dealing with groundwater contaminants. And it didn't take long after I became a staffer with Congressman Studs that I realized just how valuable that experience was, because my first issue was here in Falmouth, dealing with the problems here.
Right. And we've come a long way, I think, in our understanding of the groundwater flow, but we still have lots of issues that affect the entire Cape when it comes to quality of water.
No question.
Yeah.
The water supply issues are clearly among the top. We tend to sort of live on top of our drinking water,
Yes.
so which means that we have to make every effort to protect it. And not only that, but we have along our coasts water that flows from the ground out to our coastline, and oftentimes bringing with it nutrients and other substances and other chemicals that it picks up along the way. And in some cases, our estuaries are heavily stressed. And our challenge going forward, and this is one of the reasons why I'm running for county commissioner, is that many of our communities are going to be facing a very significant financial hurdle in terms of wrestling with this problem. And I think my role as a county commissioner will be to help our towns get the federal and state dollars and resources to help tackle this problem. This is a problem that communities cannot tackle alone. It's incredibly expensive. And we've got to get the federal government and state government more involved. I think my background, working in the Congress with 2 congressmen, my background working in local government for many years, and my success in helping bringing dollars here, I think will be very helpful, very useful here in Falmouth, but also in other communities as well.
Well, that certainly answers one of the questions I had that I was going to ask you, because I think some people might wonder, why county government? Is it we have state government, local government? Is it this layer of county government? And you've partly answered that question because we have these regional concerns. But I think our viewers may want to learn more about what county government does.
Well, here on Cape Cod, we've been, I think, blessed to have a very robust form of county government. As you mentioned, county government deals with a lot of our regional problems. Regional planning, regional land use management. We have a Cape Cod Commission to help us better plan and deal with matters of land use, developments of regional impact, finding ways to make sure that we're protecting the natural resources here while also developing in ways that are sustainable. Yeah. We also have a cooperative extension service that provides assistance to homeowners, farmers, those engaged in aquaculture. Yes. Those involved in fishing, provides a whole range of services to help people.
Right, that wonderful Master Gardener program that we all...
It's incredibly popular, isn't it?
Yes, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
We're lucky.
Yes, and then we have a county health department. We have a county economic development council. All told, the county budget's around $28 million, and there are roughly 390 employees, somewhere thereabouts. And essentially, they're involved in all of these departments providing all of these services. And when you look at the problems that we have to address going forward, whether it's regional transportation, water quality, water supply, when you look at economic development, each of these areas alone can't really wrestle with them. They need help at any level. And I think that's an area where I see great opportunity. I also see it's an area where, quite frankly, we need to prepare for some of the other challenges in the future. You know, the Cape's changing, changing in many ways, and in some cases we need to prepare for some of these challenges.
Now, I know that technically the commissioners present ordinances to the Assembly of Delegates and sort of bylaws, but in what position is a commissioner in to effect some real changes that might need to be done? How can that happen?
Well, first of all, there are 3 county commissioners. Right. All right. And now each town has a representative to county government through its assembly. There's a sort of a legislative body that reviews the county commissioner's budget proposal and renders a decision on it. But the county commissioner's job is largely to set priorities and to identify areas where the county can be more helpful and more involved with local communities. I think also it's an area where, quite frankly, it's where the region can speak with one voice on a particular set of problems. For example, on water quality, on our wastewater problems, for example, we as a region will be more successful in getting federal and state help if we can speak with one voice as to how best to tackle and address these problems. And right now, the county's in the middle of this very comprehensive water quality planning effort. And we can anticipate that when this plan is done by the end of the year, our goal will be to make sure that it's embraced by all of the Cape towns. But it's a deliberative process. The towns are all having input in it so that it truly reflects what Barnstable County needs. And then our goal from there will be to make sure that it has the right tools and right approaches. Here in Falmouth, folks have been very, very innovative and very creative in how they're tackling this problem. So there's a lot that we can learn from what's happening here in Falmouth. And but at the end of the day, we'll have one plan that hopefully speaks to at least how we're going to address these problems in all of our communities, and so that we can at least lay out for the state and federal government our best approach and plan. This is very similar to what we did when we tackled the pollution problems at the military base. In the early years out at the military base at MMR, the Mass Military Reservation, there was quite a bit of disagreement over how best to tackle these problems. And so we needed to spend time amongst ourselves, town officials at the table, along with the regulators at the state and federal level, and getting some of even the activist groups represented at the table, where we could begin to hash out one vision, one overall approach to tackling this problem. Now, that was something that I worked on when I was with Congressman Studs. We played a very active role in helping shape that initial plan, and we were very successful in getting the federal government to support it. And then eventually that led to additional federal dollars and state dollars that could come in to help pay for some of this work.
Do you think your experience and your strength in getting funding for serious issues is going to be important as a commissioner? I
think so. I really do. I think also my experience in working with federal and state agencies, I think one of the things that I've learned, particularly here in Falmouth, is that sometimes federal officials and state officials, they may think they have an idea of what might work well in a particular community, but they really need to listen closely to what the local officials have to say. Oftentimes, the level of expertise and understanding, the capabilities in a local community are not fully appreciated.
And they are ever so much more complicated, too. They're
no question.
Technical.
No question.
Right.
And I think one of the things that we were successful in doing with the base problems is making sure that the federal and state officials really understood this problem from Falmouth's perspective, or from this perspective of all of the Upper Cape communities, that oftentimes the local officials actually had good answers and they sound ideas and judgments. I think the reason why we were successful in getting the cleanup done and done right, although it's not finished, but getting it well underway and in the right direction, is largely because we were able to make sure that the local communities were real partners in this effort, that they actually had a role, they had a voice, and they could be actively involved in the decision making. Until we did that, it was very, very difficult to make much progress. But once we made sure that the towns had a seat at the table, that Falmouth had a seat at the table, we could bring in some of that collective expertise and the talent that was here and apply that to the problems. And it was amazing how successful this effort became once we got the towns more involved.
Right. And so that was an important lesson learned that we can apply to today's problems, that working together as a region is how we'll solve some of these problems.
Exactly.
And I'm thinking now about something about you on a more personal level. I read that you are a bird lover.
Well, I love birds. I'm very lucky. I live in the town of Yarmouth, and with my wife, Carol. We have 2 kids, and they went through the public school system in Dennis, Yarmouth. And we live in a very nice place where there's lots of wildlife. We have coyotes visiting from time to time. We have foxes periodically showing up, and we have a lot of bird traffic at our house. Yeah, so I very much enjoy the outdoors here on the Cape. We're very blessed to have such a beautiful place.
Which is one reason why you want to work to keep it beautiful.
Keep it that way, yeah.
Yeah.
I've had the chance to work on a number of open space projects. You know, here in this area, I was very involved when I was with Congressman Studs to work on the Wacoyet Bay Estuarine Research Reserve project. I worked on the Mashpee Wildlife Refuge, and I was very involved with Representative Turkington and other Falmouth officials in helping win passage of a land bank to protect open space. And so my experience over the years has been heavily involved in land conservation and protecting habitat for wildlife here in this region. I've learned a lot. Oftentimes, my own personal experiences have been just sort of enriched by just being able to spend time working on these kinds of initiatives.
Now, one of the piece of information that most of us have recently learned is that our senior population, in a decade or so, our population will be 65% senior citizens. I wonder what sorts of problems that's going to present to the Cape.
Well, I'm glad you raised this because I think this is an area where county officials, I think, can play a role in actually helping us understand what this might mean.
Yeah.
I mean, because we really need to study this and look at this. You know, in my travels around the Cape, this is something that I do talk about, how the Cape is aging, and it presents a whole range of challenges as a region in terms of housing. We know that many elders that will be retiring won't have the kind of retirement income that perhaps previous generations have had.
Exactly, that's a critical issue.
Exactly, so the need for services will certainly grow. We also need to become better prepared and better equipped to deal with a growing Alzheimer's population, a frail elder population. And over the years, the county has, you know, been successful in getting funding to help support elder programs, but also affordable housing programs. One of the things that impressed me years ago and got me actually started my interest in the county government was working with the county on an affordable assisted living project out at the former county hospital. This complex that we had for years was eventually converted into an assisted living area, and it was designed in a way to make most of the units affordable.
That's very important. We certainly, that's going to be a huge issue.
It is. So I think it's going to have, the aging of our population will have an effect on our nutrition programs. It'll have an effect on transportation. There'll be areas in terms of housing. Each of these areas we're going to have to be prepared for. We're also going to have to learn, how do we make our communities more aging friendly? And how do we deal with those seniors that might be somewhat uncomfortable and that might find themselves isolated? That's an experience that I've become very sensitive to, the number of elders who often find themselves isolated in the community. You know, how do we reach out to them? How do we not lose touch with this part of the community? How do we get them more engaged? What do we do at our senior centers? You know, senior centers, we may have to adjust some of the programs and services that are offered there. So my hope is that in the very near future, at the county level, we'll be able to assist communities in understanding what the changing demographics will mean, what they'll mean in terms of services, how we can become better prepared, and we can provide a lot of guidance and help to some of the housing organizations and some of the others that really serve this population, so that we can collectively learn how to better serve this community. So it's clearly an area for county government to play an active role.
Definitely. And with the senior population growing is the need for transportation. You've already done a great deal of work in transportation on the Cape, going all the way back many years ago.
Yeah, thank you. Transportation is an area that I have a lot of interest in. Here in Falmouth, I enjoyed working on the Shining Sea Bike Path project.
Yes.
I happened to serve on the Regional Transit Authority, and then I co-chaired a public transit task force in which we expanded public transportation on Cape Cod, using largely non-local funds, but mostly state and federal dollars to do that. We were able to leverage and bring in other outside dollars to do that. But you're right, the Cape as it's grown, we do have congestion issues. We do have a greater need for public transportation. And we need to also take full advantage of our bike paths and finding ways to expand the network of bike paths so that our communities could take advantage of that form of transportation. It's often overlooked, but it's very, very important.
We're all seeing more and more cyclists on the roads, and and that's encouraging, I think, but we need also to make sure that they're going to be safe.
Well, I think people increasingly are looking for amenities and attributes of communities that enable them to move around without depending on an automobile. People like to walk, so sidewalks, bike paths, other ways to get around without having to be dependent on a car, I think are increasingly becoming important. We're finding, at least in some of my consulting work, we're finding that the communities that are very pedestrian-oriented, very pedestrian-friendly, are communities that are very desirable and have, fairly stable and, property values. Areas where there's also an interest in investment and economic development. So, surprisingly, transportation is not, not just an amenity or something that we need to think about in terms of helping us getting around, but we're starting to realize increasingly that transportation is critical from an economic development point of view, from a downtown revitalization point of view, from a community revitalization point of view. So there are a lot of reasons why we need to pay closer attention to this.
Yes. Have you been following the success of the train that has been a huge success?
I have been. It's exciting. This is the service into Hyannis. It's been amazing. It's been great to see it, and I think we're very blessed to have a very active and engaged regional transit authority. They've done a great job with this.
Well, I'm just so pleased that we had this opportunity to talk. Thank you very much for joining us here in Falmouth. And I want to suggest to our viewers that they vote on November 4th. Our date for registration is October 15th. Town Hall will be open till 8 o'clock. And those of you who have not registered to vote, I urge you to do so. Thank you.